Okay, this video is going to give you a review of the Chapter 9 concepts, and this is all graphing lines, y equals mx plus b, horizontal lines, vertical lines. So you will have three types of lines that you'll be either graphing or writing equations for. The first one's slanted lines, and the second one is horizontal lines. The third one is vertical lines. So for slanted lines, these will can all be in the format y equals mx plus b. Some of them are going to have just y equals mx. That's okay because the b on those is going to be 0. The slope on this particular one is 4/3, where you would go up 4 and right 3, and your y-intercept on this one would be 0, 0. You might have y equals mx plus b where you actually do have a b. The slope is still going to be the coefficient of x. In this case, it's a -2, and we're going to take that off and put a 1 under it so that we have two directions we can go in, down 2 and right 1, in order to get to the next points. And the y-intercept on this one is 0, 3. Horizontal lines are all going to be y lines, so it'll be y equal to some number. In this particular graph, y is equal to -5, and it's a horizontal line. The slope of a horizontal line is 0 because you can walk on a flat surface. And that y-intercept of this particular line is 0, -5. So horizontal lines will have y-intercepts. Vertical lines are x lines, so it'll be x equal to some number. And in this particular case, x is equal to 6, making that vertical line to the right of the 5 there. And the slope of all vertical lines are undefined, and most vertical lines are not going to have any y-intercepts. The only one that would be the one that actually is a vertical line on top of the y-axis. You don't have to worry about that one. So for your purposes, your vertical lines don't have a slope and don't have a y-intercept. Let's look a little bit more closely at some things. So on some of your test questions, you'll be able to find some points, so you can graph some slanted lines. In this particular case, you've got -4x plus 3y equals 0, and you would just set yourself up an xy table. And when you do this, it's really easier if you just go ahead and pick some random or thoughtful values for x and see what y's go with those. So we're going to always try 0, and by trying 0, that means plug it into the original equation and solve for y. After you go through the steps, when I plug in the 0 for x, I actually get a 0 out for y on this particular equation. So I'm going to throw that in the table. The other strategy on this particular problem is to try variations of that coefficient on the y when you plug it in for x. So you could try x equals 3 and plug that in, solve for y, you would get +4, and you could also try x equals -3. Plug that one in and solve and get -4. After you finish finding 3 points, you can just gather them together as coordinate pairs and graph them on the coordinate plane, and then just draw a line through them. So that's finding points so that you can graph a slanted line. You can just pick values for x, and there's different strategies for finding good values of x that will give you integer values for y. The other strategy you could use is go ahead and solve for y so you can graph a slanted line. This will put it into y equals mx plus b, and you'll have a slope and an intercept that you can use. In this particular case, after you add the 4x and divide by that 3, you'll get y equals 4/3 x. There is a +0 there. It's kind of hidden. It doesn't have to be there, but it's also, I graded out for you so that you could remember that yes, this would be your y-intercept. If you don't have one in a slanted line, it's assumed that that y-intercept is 0, 0. So you would plot that initial point and then just use your slope to find additional points. So starting at that first point, you would go up 4 and right 3, and you would do it again. There you would have 3 points, you just draw a line through. Okay, that's putting it in y equals mx plus b and graphing it with the slope and the intercept. You can also graph y equals mx plus b slanted lines that have where the b is actually in the equation. This one gives you the slope is -2 and the point is 0, 5, and you'll recognize that as an intercept, so you'll just write the equation y equals mx plus b, put the slope as a coefficient of x, and just take the y coordinate out of the point and put that in as b. So y equals -2x plus 5, and then you'd proceed with the y-intercept first, and then take the slope off. Now, you could go down 2 and right 1, or if you want to swap the slope around so that you can go in the different direction, you could go up 2 and left 1. Go ahead and draw the line through those points, and that's just graphing y equals mx plus b. For horizontal lines, you're going to think y lines. So all y lines are horizontal. For example, let's just pick one, y equals 4. If you were going to do a table of points for this, all of your y values would need to be 4. And you would think of random x values that would go with those. So for example, you could pick a 0, you could pick a positive value, and a negative value. As long as all those y's are 4, you're fine. And gather up those points. You would graph that horizontal line at y equals 4, and you would remember that all horizontal lines have a slope of 0. So we're very happy about that. It's a flat line. If it's horizontal, your slope is 0. With vertical lines, it's just the opposite. So you're thinking x lines this time. All x lines are vertical. And in this example, we could pick an x equals -3, and we would know that that's a vertical line. If we were going to do a table of values, this time the x values would all have to be -3, and we can pick random values for the y values. That doesn't matter. So you could pick a positive value, you could pick a 0, and you could also pick a negative value, as long as all those x's are -3. Then you could gather your points together and graph your vertical line at x equals -3. It's got some of the points on it. And for all vertical lines, they have an undefined slope, which means you cannot stand on the line, and that's the purpose. Again, if you've got a slope, you can actually stand and walk on it. If your slope is undefined, you cannot. And that sums up your basic concepts for Chapter 9 material.